We've all heard of Jeffrey Dahmer, but have you heard of Nathaniel Bar-Jonah, a child abuser, a child murderer, and a suspected cannibal? And there are so many disturbing and disgusting things that he's done, it's hard to figure out where to start. Nathaniel was actually born as David Paul Brown. He was born in 1957 and was raised in Massachusetts. There were very early signs that something was wrong about him. At age 7, he was gifted a Ouija board and he decided that he wanted to use it. So he got a neighbor, a 5-year-old girl, to come down to his basement under the pretenses of testing out the Ouija board. Once they were alone in the basement together, he attempted to strangle her. And the only thing that saved her life that day is that David, or Nathaniel's mother, heard the little girl's screams and rushed down to the basement. His mother assumed that he just didn't know what he was doing, and due to that, nothing more came of the incident. Soon after, he convinced another neighbor, a 6-year-old boy, to go sledding with him. But when they were alone together, he sexually assaulted the boy. As Nathaniel became older, he came up with more ways to lure children. In 1975, an 8-year-old boy was on his way to school. Nathaniel stopped him, pretending to be a police officer. He then managed to get the boy into his car, where he began to sexually assault him and strangle him. But a neighbor saw what he was doing and put an end to the attempted abduction. At that time, he was only sentenced to 1 year of probation. Just 3 years later, Nathaniel would pretend to be a police officer again. This time, he put on the facade for 2 boys who were going to the movie theater. Nathaniel got them into a secluded area and began molesting them. One of the boys was being too loud for his liking, so he decided to strangle him until he thought that he was dead. He put the other boy in his trunk and drove off. But luckily, the boy who he strangled woke up and ran and got help. In that time, Nathaniel got 18 to 20 years in prison. And while he was in prison, he actually got transferred to a mental institution. This is because he told the prison psychiatrist his fantasies of murdering, strangling, molesting, and eventually eating children. And despite these disturbing admissions, a judge declared in 1991 that he was not a dangerous threat. He was allowed to be free on probation so long as he moved in with his mother in Montana. But the issue here is that after he was free to go, no one actually checked in on him to make sure he was still following the guidelines of his probation. He fled to the quiet small town of Great Falls, Montana. And it was here that he took up that new identity of Nathaniel Bar-Jonah. He claimed that he was always Jewish and wanted to understand the persecution that Jewish people faced. He moved into a small apartment that was surrounded by schools and children. And he hung a pulley in his apartment where he would hang children by their necks. He molested and abused several children while living in Great Falls. One mother recounted her son suddenly becoming very reclusive and depressed, but she didn't know why. And it turned out that her son was one of the many children who Nathaniel abused. Nathaniel was finally on the authorities' radar when a 10-year-old little boy went missing. It was in early February of 1996 when 10-year-old Zachary Ramsey went missing. One minute he was seen walking to school and the next he was gone. His case quickly went cold. And it was during this time period, too, that Nathaniel started delivering his neighbors food. These were dishes like chili, and several of his neighbors asked him what the strange meat was. Nathaniel claimed that it was deer meat from deer that he hunted, but no one knew him to be a hunter. 3 years later, in 1999, Nathaniel was standing outside of an elementary school dressed as a police officer and holding a gun. Impersonating a police officer was the crime that he was arrested for. The police were mortified by what they found in his apartment: thousands of photos of children, a strange journal written in code, and a human bone. The journal was sent off to be decoded by the FBI. They found recipes with disturbing names, with the main ingredient being children. The names of these recipes included barbecued kid, little boy stew, and he wrote about his obsession and love for murdering and torturing children. He also had a list of 22 names of children, some of which who were identified and some weren't. When it came to Zachary Ramsey, they did try to convict him of the murder, but despite all of the circumstantial evidence, there was not enough to convict him. Neighbors, though, wondered if Zachary was fed to them. Other neighbors, though, came forward about him molesting their children. And because of that, he was sentenced to 130 years in prison. But he only ended up serving a very small fraction of that sentence because he was found dead in his cell in 2008. Nathaniel was 300 pounds and ended up dying from a cardiovascular disease.